And welcome back. Joining us for our first conversation are representatives from the Traffic Department to talk to us about the Belize Road Safety Initiative. Joining us is Dr. Vanlaar, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Traffic Injury Research Foundation from Canada. We also have Ms. Robyn Robertson, who is the President and CEO of the Traffic Injury Research Foundation of Canada, and Mr. Tirso Galvez, representing us, the Belize Traffic Department. Good morning and welcome to Open Your Eyes. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
So, like we were talking earlier, traffic issues are really, really important, but for some reason in our country, it's not seen as a really, maybe a priority issue. Talk to us a little bit about why you think that's so, Mr. Galvez.
Okay, thanks for asking me that, because we have been saying this over and over, and just like you rightly mentioned, that we believe that the public is not taking traffic fatalities and injuries as serious as it should be taken. And you know, when you hear about somebody getting shot, or like to me, like people are more focused in those areas, people being killed, rather than looking also at the issues of traffic fatalities. It's still a life being lost, you know, and it's basically the effect of having people, you know, loved one who dies, and sometimes it's the breadwinner of the family, and it trickles down to the entire family. The cost to resources, as we have been saying, that the last study, which was done in 2008, 2009, actually showed in Belize that the cost of traffic injuries and accident came up to about $32 million, which reflected about 1.26 of the GDP. And so, you know, so it is very important, I believe, that and we should look at the injuries and fatalities more seriously.
And why do you think that for Belizeans it's still not hitting home? Because I think you hear these figures and you think, wow, that's insane. But for many people, because they haven't been directly impacted by maybe a traffic accident, or we haven't even having a relative being impacted, it's still not registering. How do you think that's going to be? How do you think the mentality is going to shift if that's not registering?
I think the thing is that, like, shows like these would be are the ideal. We need to reach out to people more. We need to let them know. Yes, because like I said, when you look at accident in Belize, almost everybody knows one another, and it does affect the family. It does you know, it is something very close. You know, losing a loved one. You know, and I think that. We, from the Department of Transport, we have a responsibility to go out more and to make people aware of the issues, you know, and let them know that it is a serious situation. As a matter, it has been considered a health issue, you know, and so we need to address it.
Absolutely. Now, let's bring it over to Robyn and Dr. Vanlaar just to talk a bit about what the Traffic Injury Research Foundation does in Canada and your outreach internationally.
So we're an independent road safety research institute. We're set up as a registered charity, and our sole focus is the behavior of people on the road, simply because that is one of the largest reasons for crashes and collisions. So the focus of our work is to do research to understand what are the most effective ways to change behavior and how that integrates with engineering, with infrastructure and vehicle design. So part of our work is also the outreach. We use the research to increase awareness about what are the risks on the road, what are the types of strategies that road users can protect themselves. And we, having worked in a number of different countries, you do see a lot of similarities, including with some of the issues here in Belize. We also see them very prevalent in other countries.
Yeah. And from your experience, what seems to be, let's say, the top 3 reasons or top 3 behaviors that lead to crashes and collisions?
Well, if I may perhaps just go back to what Mr. Galvez was saying and what we were talking about first, I think perhaps there's a little bit of complacency because people don't necessarily see the fatalities as a health issue. I think that was a really good way of putting it. It doesn't have to be like that. We have the knowledge to prevent these fatalities from happening. I believe based on the most recent data that we are aware of for Belize, in 2015 there were well over 1,900 crashes. Of those 83 crashes were fatalities where people died, and 88, I believe, were crashes with serious injuries. It doesn't have to be like that. There's a lot that we can do about that to prevent that from happening. The most important reasons, if we look at the data from across the globe, we often see that it's behavior related, it's speeding, it's impairment because of drinking perhaps, or because of, in many countries now, drug impaired driving. There's also a lot of distracted driving going on. I think we've seen that a lot here as well. A lot of people have cell phones and maybe using them when they're driving. So those three behaviors are really important ones that we can do something about. And then going back to the crash data that we know about from Belize, a lot of the crashes seem to be happening because of a lack of attention, which is a general category in which distracted driving, I think, also has an important place.
So you guys are recently, you recently arrived in the country, and I'm assuming there's some sort of research that is going to take place to delve deeper into the behaviors that Belizeans have on our roadways, right?
Correct. So actually we've been here a couple of times, and we've been working together with all of the people involved in the large road safety project, in which attention is being paid to a variety of things, not only the behavior but also enforcement of behavior, also, as Robyn mentioned, looking at infrastructure, looking at management of road safety, looking at safer vehicles. So those are all part of a very broad holistic approach to improve road safety, because at the end of the day we know from 30-40 years of research or even longer in other countries around the world that there's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's no one thing that you can do which will all of a sudden solve the whole problem. So we need to focus on all of these different things.
Do you know, it's quite interesting because my sister is actually learning to drive, and she's learning to drive with a local instructor. But one of the things that I notice in our country, we don't have that many driving instructors, because I think that behavior on the road is learned. And if you don't have the proper instruction, then the behavior learned is going to be all over the place. What do you think are some of the reasons why in our country, one, we don't have that many instructors, and two, when we do impart that knowledge onto our children, the people that we love, the issue of safety on the road is kind of not, it's secondary, and everything else is, oh, you drive straight, you turn, you put on your indicator. Why is that the case?
So I would say teaching young people to drive is one of the hardest things to do. And often we spend more time focusing on the physical, manual, motor skills of driving the car, and we don't pay as much attention to some of the cognitive skills. We know that one of the most difficult things for young people, and where they're most at risk, is they don't anticipate hazards happening on the road, or they don't see the hazard happening on the road. And it's that overall situational awareness of paying attention to everything that's happening on the road and how quickly it might change, and being prepared for that. So I think there just needs to be a better balance between the physical operation of the vehicle, understanding the road signs, and really all of the basic things, but then thinking about some of the cognitive aspects in terms of how do you look at the environment, what should you be looking at, how to anticipate hazards.
How to be responsible.
I mean, so many parents wish they could teach that in other lessons other than driving, when it comes to teens. And I'm glad you tapped into that. You know, behavior change, I think, is one of the most underestimated challenges that we face in trying to help societies to engage in better behaviors. Now, what is your approach? There's the research component, I hear that very clearly, but how do you identify strategies as to how to impact a person that they want to change their behavior? Because, you know, the road safety project, the traffic department, the police have worked continuously on educating people on speed limits and seat belts and maintaining as much order as they can on the roadways, and even pedestrians and cyclists as well. But how do we go the additional step from providing information to triggering an action within individuals?
So there's two important components to that. The first is motivating the person to want to change their behavior. And for different people, that's different things. Some people are very motivated by wanting to avoid a fine. Some people are very motivated by their personal safety. Some are motivated by the safety of others. So in terms of delivering education, we need to think about for each audience what will motivate them to change their behavior. So that's the first part. The second part is really giving them a strategy to replace an unsafe behavior. It's very easy to say, don't do this, but you need to tell them what to do instead, and it's important that that's easier. So putting on your seatbelt every time you get in the car, that's a safety strategy, and getting people to, one, be motivated to put on their seatbelt, and then two, to understand how easy it is to put on their seatbelt. Those are the types of strategies that we focus on.
Yeah. Now, it's very interesting that you said that, and I share a personal anecdote that came out from the Conversations at Road Safety Project. I didn't know that your back seat passengers, if not wearing their seatbelt, can be one of your greatest hazards in an accident. So I struggled with getting everyone to put on their seatbelt. So I start to tell them, now listen, this isn't about you. This is about me. If we crash, you'll hurt me. So please put it on.
Exactly.
And that way, it's forcibly telling them. So I think some information can target people in a particular way. I say that because, these tidbits of information are coming out. I know we've spoken about how a couple seconds of distracted driving can really impact how you manipulate yourself on the roadways. In Belize specifically, we haven't seen the kind of punitive measures when it comes to safe driving that we see in other parts of the world. Is that perhaps the first step that needs to be taken, that there is a move to ensure that people have on their seatbelts, that the seatbelts work in the cars, that the kids are in car seats as just a first step?
Well, actually, we have tried, and we had done a revision of the seatbelt regulation. As you know, that presently the seatbelt regulation applies to the front seat, to the driver and the front seat passenger. We have recently made a submission to Cabinet for some legislative changes, and Cabinet have approved several of our recommendations, and that including the wearing of seat belts for the back seat passengers now. And that will be submitted to the Solgen for drafting, legal drafting, and it will not be only for the highways, but also from the time you are in the vehicle within the municipalities. So we are moving, and we are getting support from the government. I think they are more serious now about the whole issue of road safety, and so it indeed a great support for us who are trying to promote this whole issue of road safety.
Now, I would imagine enforcement will be challenging.
Enforcement, one of the issue is, for example, is lack of human resource. However, we working together with other enforcement agencies, for example, the municipalities and the police, who also have a traffic branch. We are working together with them to get them together to work with us to do the enforcement. I also like to say that in the submission made, we also had submission made for the use of the cell phone, and that was also approved by Cabinet. And it's just to put it in the legal terms. It's not that you will not be able, but you won't be able to be using anything in your hand to be coming. So, hands-free possible and things. So there are several of these things that we have submitted and have gotten approval. Also, Cabinet have approved the increase of fine for people who refuse to be tested for alcohol, because we have several of that where a person, well, it's already in the law where if you refuse, it automatically you are being charged. But now the fine has been increased up to $2,500 now, where you refuse to take either a urine or blood test. And also the fine for driving under the influence of alcohol has been increased from $5,000 to $2,500. So indeed, these are some of the issues that have been keeping us sometimes from doing our enforcement and letting people realize that it is a serious
How important is it to have punitive measures in place when it comes to behavior change?
Well, I think having a carrot and a stick is really important. The carrot is what Robyn was talking about in terms of how do you give people something that's easier to do to motivate them to change their behavior. Having the stick is really important as well, because if people don't have the impression that they can be caught, and that if they are caught that there will be consequences, it's unlikely that they will be again motivated to change their behavior. We have seen from research from around the world in many countries, leading countries in road safety, that having good enforcement is essential to be able to improve road safety in your country. So it's going to be essential, especially in light of the fact that resources are limited. That's also something that we see everywhere. If resources are limited, it's going to be even more important to be as efficient as possible with the resources that you have to create that the environment where people truly believe like, hey, if I'm doing this and I'm not supposed to, I will be caught. And once you've created that atmosphere where people believe that, where they, we call that a general deterrent effect, to deter people from not wearing their seatbelt or from speeding, once you've created that, you will be much more efficient.
You know, okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to add there's another aspect to enforcement that we know is important that we don't recognize perhaps as often, and that is how the community also contributes to enforcement. We know that people are very motivated in their behavior by what other people think. So just the simple act of saying to your family member, to your friend, to your colleague, like you yourself, I would like you to put on your seatbelt. I would like you not to use the phone. If people recognize that other people think it's unacceptable to do that, and other people speak up and say so, that's an important way to enhance that enforcement and that deterrence that Ward was talking about.
Exactly. I always say that people should not feel that you are forcing them to do something which you know will protect them, and it's protecting, for example, using the helmet as we're saying. I mean, that's very important. We all know that it's very likely that when you crash involving a motorcycle, you know, the injuries are very great compared to when you crash in a vehicle, and it's normally your head that gets the impact. And so I believe that people should not have to be told or you have to ticket somebody to wear their helmet, to wear their seat belt. It has been proven. We have testimonies from people who have survived the recent accident that happened in Placencia with all those people that flew out from behind the vehicle. Again, that's another issue with people traveling behind the open pickup. We are coming to we are celebrating Easter, and there will be a lot of movement of people going to the rivers and the beaches, and some of these things are examples. You know, it's very hard to say, but it's the truth, and people have to realize that they have to take precaution, and you know, it's their life we're talking about here.
You know, I think you're so right. We started off this week with, I think, a solid example or solid examples of why this is a priority for this country. And it seems that it's our young lives that seem to be impacted the most. There was the Placencia accident involving 12 people. And there was the accident in Spanish Lookout with an ATV and a vehicle. Now, looking at the Spanish Lookout incident, I think that's one of the areas that we don't talk about as much. We focus a lot on our drivers, you know, how drivers are supposed to function on the road. And I know there is some education on pedestrian or other road users. What are some of the messages that need to go out there? When we have a hit and run in the middle of the night with a cyclist on the road, nobody asks what they were wearing or whether their bicycle had a light. But these are important messages, because I can be safe, but in the middle of the night, on a road that's not well lit, I can only do so much. What are some of the messages for other road users?
Well, I think it's important that all road users understand that if you're a road user, you're participating in traffic, you can either pose a risk or be exposed to a risk, and you need to behave accordingly. You need to behave safely to protect others, and you need to protect yourself. For vulnerable road users, which that's often how we refer to them, pedestrians, bicyclists, that includes also making sure that you're being visible. Wearing bright clothes at night can certainly help to make it easier for drivers to see you. That doesn't mean that the driver doesn't have the responsibility anymore to be careful and pay attention when he or she is driving, but it's all about a shared responsibility. So the whole framework that we're using today to improve road safety in most countries around the world today is what is called Vision Zero, which is the idea that we know that these crashes that happen are preventable. We want to get to the situation where nobody has to die or has to be seriously injured. And to be able to accomplish that, this whole vision is based on the idea that there's a shared responsibility. And the shared responsibility means it's not only the government who needs to do everything they can to make the roads safer, it's also obviously the drivers who need to behave carefully, but it's also perhaps the teachers who can teach children in schools about safety. It's perhaps even the children who can tell their parents, hey, I've learned this today about wearing my seatbelt, why are you not wearing your seatbelt? And it's also about vulnerable road users who need to understand that, especially today when active modes of transportation are becoming more and more important and more people want to be healthy and walk and ride a bicycle, well, that's great and that's good for being healthy, it's good for the environment, but you have to do it carefully and safely.
You know, Robyn, you mentioned earlier that a part of the awareness campaign is to promote the factor of the car, the vehicles that we drive. And I think in Belize, a substantive issue is the fact that a lot of people aren't driving newer vehicles. It's because for very reasonable factors, they're really expensive, the import duty and all these things. How do you promote the culture of being aware of the type of vehicle you're driving, making sure that it has all these really new, innovative tools like the beeping when you don't have your seatbelt on, the early braking? How do you promote a culture or promote the message of the importance of having newer vehicles? Because even when you look at taxis, I don't think I've seen a taxi older than maybe 2005 in our country, and it's 2017. So how do you promote that message?
Well, I think the most important feature in your vehicle to protect you is your seatbelt. So having seatbelts is an important first thing. I think there are lots of different features that are available. We've put together an education program called Brain on Board, where you can actually learn about the different features and how they work. I think the important message with the safety features is the safety features still require an attentive driver. It still requires you to maintain a proper following distance, to be prepared for hazards and pay attention to what's happening outside your vehicle. And that's something even in North America that we struggle with. With safety features, they do have a lot of positive benefits, but we need to make sure that the drivers understand. So I think for people looking at getting a vehicle, asking the right questions, what are the kinds of safety features that are on the car, before they purchase the vehicle, I think that's a great way to inform yourself about what the options are and what's available to you.
But at the end of the day, the Brain on Board campaign is really meant to communicate to people that your most important safety feature of your vehicle is your brain. So it's certainly great to promote to people acquiring or buying new vehicles that have these very sophisticated safety technologies, because they do work. Don't get me wrong, they certainly work.
But you can still ignore them if you're not driving safely.
So you need to use your brain, and the seatbelt is still today, with all these sophisticated features, the simple technology of the seatbelt is still the single most important feature to protect you.
And we from the Department of Transport, who has a responsibility for the licensing and registration of vehicles, along with the municipalities, since they also have that responsibility, we have a responsibility where the law is telling us that we should not renew the license or issue the license for our vehicle if the seat belts are not working. So we could refuse to license or renew the license for any vehicle, but how many of us at the department are doing the proper inspection for these vehicles? That's the thing.
It's true, because a lot of people buy these vehicles online, and they buy them because they were they're refurbished, they were in an accident, and then the seatbelts aren't working or the airbags aren't working, and but they buy it because it's affordable, and they're putting their health before.
Right, because we've
those can be stopped from the import level as well.
Exactly, and even importing vehicles that the airbags is not working anymore, that has been involved in crash in the States or somewhere, and then we import these vehicles, they don't have an airbag in the vehicle, and again these vehicles get involved in accident, and that airbag protects you from, that's the reason it was placed there in the first place. We have met people on our checkpoints, the officers have met several vehicles and when they ask them about their seatbelt, the seatbelt is not working or they don't have it. So how you have a license on your vehicle? That's the first question. You shouldn't have gotten a license in the first place. This vehicle does not belong on the road. We could take that vehicle off the road. We could take off the license stickers, because to us it is a vehicle which is unfit to be on the road at that point.
Yeah.
So we could do that.
So I hear very clearly that part of the move is to move towards better enforcement as best that you can within your resources. Let me ask how you work together to come up with your strategies, how to change these behaviors that you have identified and that we know to be a part of the issue. How do you work along with local counterparts when you come in to an international setting to have them help to come up with the strategies?
Well, I think there's a couple important steps. One is to see who are the different stakeholders in road safety and what piece of the puzzle do they bring to the table. Learning about what has already been done, what has worked well, what has not worked well, and then I think coordinating activities across the different organizations, because we do know across all countries having that comprehensive piece of the puzzle is very important. So doing the work up front to look at what's the context, what's available, who contributes a piece of the puzzle, how do they work, what has worked well for them, and then how do you leverage all of those strengths and put them together to come up with a comprehensive strategy.
Just to tap into that, coming to Belize, it's a very different landscape, and I'm sure that implementing these different strategies, it may be kind of tricky to translate, especially across the districts, because traffic in Belize City is completely different to traffic in Orange Walk or Kai or in more rural areas. How do you ensure that the translation is effective?
But we ensure that by working with local people. So some of the things that need to be communicated to the stakeholders that we work with, for example, for the training on enforcement, some of the components will be very abstract, almost general, and will be the same whether you teach about it in one country or another. But to be able to adapt it to the local context and to be able to make sure that the translation of the knowledge takes place and that the local people can really benefit from it, there is no other way but to work with people locally and to find out from them, is this how this would work in your country or not, and if not, please tell us how it would work so we can adjust what we have prepared, because otherwise we will be talking and nobody will be hearing or nobody will be benefiting from it.
And we do face similar issues in other countries. There often is a bigger difference between urban areas and rural areas than there is between country to country, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And in most countries, many more or a much larger segment of the country is more rural than urban. And unfortunately, sometimes strategies are developed more with the urban setting and urban resources in mind. So in the last 10 years, we've spent a lot of time looking at what's the context like in rural areas and how do you take those urban strategies or urban centered strategies and accommodate them in a rural context, to acknowledge that some of the resources may not be there, that some of the organizations or entities who would be partners may not be there, and what other opportunities are there to fill some of those gaps and really make it a local initiative.
So let's take this opportunity, since we are approaching the Easter break, that we know that we see quite a number of accidents around this time for several reasons. People are moving to their nearest watering hole to escape the heat. Some of the rural areas, it's as many people as can fit in one pickup truck will move together. And we also have quite a bit of people drinking and using the roadways. So Tirso, I want you to start off just by talking about what is usually done on the traffic front in terms of anticipating the challenges of this season?
Okay. We during this time of the year, we normally have our enforcement officers countrywide engage in a countrywide operation to be on the highways, to be monitoring the, as you said, to be monitoring the drivers and to look, we have the breathalyzers which are used as a indication to tell us that the driver is under the influence, and like I said, now we need to go and I guess we have to do more public education in respect to what will be the result of these testing now. But on a whole, we coordinate with the police department also, because I believe that the police department have already stepped up their Easter operation, and so we work jointly with them to coordinate our enforcement efforts, throughout the country.
Yeah.
Looking at these issues, and I want to say publicly that to advise the drivers and those people traveling behind the vehicle that the law is as it is, that the vehicles are only registered for the seating accommodation for the vehicle, and those people who are traveling behind the vehicle are excess passengers and passengers not properly seated, which carries two different offenses, and under the law right now, any offense, whether for excess passengers or passenger not properly seated, is $500 if you are taken to court. And so that's a serious amount of money that you will have to pay to go to court, and it's not only about the money, like we said, because the Department of Transport is not focusing on revenue. We are more looking at the safety of the people.
Yeah.
I just had one, and this question might give me a little bit of some enemies in the government, but I think, and I wanted to ask you, what the extent of how far does the extent of your research cover as it relates to government involvement in the way that roads are managed and built? Because I feel like a lot of the reasons why traffic accidents happen mainly on the highway is because, one, they're just improperly lit, and the size of the roads are somewhat ridiculous. They're the size that is set sometimes, and the barriers on the other sides are non-existent. So what extent does your research cover that area?
Well, I think Belize is the epitome of an example where a lot is being done right now through the Ministry of Economy and Petroleum and through the Road Safety Project, where one of the main components to improve road safety is focusing on road infrastructure, keeping in mind what I said a while ago, that there's no such one thing that you can do to solve the entire problem.
Yeah.
So this road safety project has been great in terms of focusing on those different pillars, those different aspects, all of which are important and have to come together to make a change. And so road infrastructure is very important, and it is a crucial aspect of getting to the vision, like accomplishing the Vision Zero strategy.
Jamie triggered something in my mind, and I'll ask you, Tirso, because we've had Crispin Jeffries on set, and I remember when they were doing the preliminary research for the upgrades to the George Price Highway, they had registered, and he said very clearly on the show that one of the top offenders in terms of speeding and improper usage of the roadways were government vehicles, which means internally the message has to be promoted first. Right. What has been happening there in terms of ensuring that those who will enforce also abide by the laws?
Thanks for that question, for bringing that up, because again, we have been discussing those issues where I believe that those enforcement agencies, for example, the police, the municipalities, the Department of Transport, we should be leading by example, and I believe that the penalties should be more severe for those officers. For example, a police officer operating a motorcycle without a helmet, for example, a transport officer not using his seat belt, and things like that. So I think that the high command for these organizations should be more on top of the people they supervise to ensure that they are carrying out so that they lead by example.
It's really prevalent, because I was walking the other day and I saw a police officer on his cell phone at night, and with 3 other people in the vehicle with him, and so it's a really prevalent issue.
And we know, especially the highway leading to Belmopan, there are a lot of drivers for government leaders who use the road recklessly.
And we have somebody. I mean, I think we had the CEO, Ms. Hyde, on set already, and she is so much into this road safety business, and she is our channel to the government departments, and she's very close to where she could make, see the changes or ensure that the government departments abide by these regulation or what we are trying to accomplish, because like I said, I think that we have to start from there. It has to be from top down.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just leave with some helpful advice or perhaps recommendations to people. People will be traveling to the southern portion of the country. They'll be using roadways. They may be traveling north. Let's just talk one more time about important safety practices that come Easter weekend people should keep in mind and why. You all can share a tip each.
Definitely.
Let's do that.
Slow down.
Check your vehicles properly.
Don't speed. Wear your seatbelt. Certainly don't drink and drive. Don't text and drive.
Don't text and drive.
Yeah.
Check your vehicles.
Yeah, for me, distraction is a significant issue. When I'm driving a car, my time in my vehicle is no one can reach me. Whatever's happening on my phone is certainly not as important as me getting to my destination. So just putting the phone down and focusing on what's happening on the roadway so that you're prepared, because ultimately you don't control the other drivers on the road.
That's right.
You can only control yourself, so you need to focus on what you're doing and be safe.
Yeah.
Drivers need to exercise a lot of respect for one another out there. They need to drive defensively. Look out for the errors for other drivers. That's very key. As Robyn said, slow down. Don't drink and drive. Check your vehicles properly before you go on long trips. Ensure that your tires are properly inflated. That that your tires are not worn out tires. Check your oil, everything on your vehicle. Ensure that your lights are working, your brakes, your seat belt. Don't put anybody to the back of the vehicle. Again, I just like to bring up that one of the submission which was made was in respect to drinking and driving was having empty containers in your vehicle, alcoholic containers. And that has been approved by cabinet also. So people will be charged for having container beverage in their vehicle, because sometimes when we are on the checkpoint, the passengers would hold, the driver would give the passenger the beer to hold and say, hold this for me, and it's actually the driver who is drinking alcohol.
Absolutely.
So that's where we are.
Well, we hope that everybody was paying attention this morning and that we will be able to prevent the accidents or the number of accidents that we normally see over this particular season. And this is really, you guys are in the midst of your sessions, and we wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we'll all become safer drivers. All right?
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of the Belize Medical Associates to talk about stress management. So stay tuned.